Welcome to episode 15 of Off the Rails with me, Claire, today. And I have a guest calling in from Berlin, Germany, is Kathrin. Welcome, Kathrin.
Thank you so much, Claire. So happy to be here.
So nice to have you. Just before we do go in, it is Kathrin's birthday today. So I am privileged to have you on such a special day. So thank you for joining me on your birthday.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't imagine a better thing to do today.
Perfect. Glad to hear that. So I get to spend a little bit of your birthday. You and I can spend it together talking about this topic that we're going to go into today, which is, of course, your business. So your business is made up of two areas in totality. So you have the side of your business, which is about nutrition, which we'll go into, and the other side is about stress management. Two areas that I think for me, I can relate to already so well. One thing that kind of pops into my mind straight away is if I feel stressed, I eat junk food. If I'm in a good mood, I know that I want my body to feel the same way. So dying to kind of dive into this a little bit deeper, because I think the two are very much related, but obviously want to speak to you. You're in the driving seat. You're the expert here today. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your business, what exactly it is that you do and what it is you offer people.
Yes. So I'm a stress management and nutrition coach, as you said, and I specialize in professional women and supporting them with dealing better with stress and improving their nutrition, and especially linking the two because, yeah, I think as we're going to explore, nutrition does so much for or against our body. So every time we eat something, we can either nourish it or, not give it as many nutrients as we would like. So those two are definitely very much interconnected, and that's why I'm combining them. And yeah, but the main thing is really tackling the stress that obviously everybody experiences.
Yeah,
And
we've all been there, done that. I think if anybody can say they haven't, let me know and
yeah.
how the hell are you doing it, because we've all had stress at some point in our lives. Stress at any level is only measurable by ourselves because we're the ones feeling it. So yeah, let's talk a little bit more then on stress. What I'd love to know is my personal experience of stress is that I kind of let it get too far. I'm just, I build my own coping mechanisms and I push it down. And I'm like, oh, I'm feeling stressed. Oh, just ignore it. Get on with today. Get on with it by the end of the week. Just get yourself through this, whatever this may be at that time. But could you tell us a little bit more about what are the triggers that we can look out for? What are the triggers that maybe get us into that mind state? What does that look like?
Yeah. So stress is actually divided into three parts or three layers, if you will. So we have our outside factors, our stressors, which can be conflict, which can be an accident, but also too much work or things that are happening in the world, like what is happening in Gaza, in the war that we're having. That's a lot for people to deal with, even if you don't always notice it right in the moment, but it just affects you because we all can feel that there's things going on and we can't really control them, and that also makes us feel really helpless. So yeah, the first one is the outside factors, and then the second one is our thoughts, so our stress producing thoughts. This can be, I haven't done enough work. I want people to like me. So I always go into people pleasing mode, basically, and never say no to things, always say yes and take on more work. And so that stress producing thought, I'm not good enough, or I want people to like me, that then leads onto a reaction and leads to more stress. And then the third one is our reaction or our behavior. So we might get angry or might go into, like, as you said, like just push through. But as long as we don't look at that behavior, we cannot cope better with it. But it also means that we have three options to tackle stress, because we can tackle all of these three areas. The first one, our circumstances, is we can, for example, leave a job that we're not happy, that really affects our mental health or even our physical health. it's not always possible for people, but you can obviously also go into like conversations where you're not happy. So that's like a thing that you can control in your circumstances. The second layer is looking at your stress producing thoughts, so your mindset around stress, like really what makes a situation so stressful for you. That's something that we not necessarily question because we just accept that a situation is stressful. But for some people, like a deadline is, for example, totally fine, and for others a deadline is causing them so much stress because they think they have to do like their best work maybe, and that's why they experience it as very stressful. And for others it's like they have done this like a million times, so they don't feel stressed by it. So a situation is neutral, but what we think about it makes us feel stressed. So looking at our thoughts can have a massive impact, and that's also what I always look at with my clients. And then the third one is the behavior or the reaction. So we can change how we cope with it. So our coping mechanisms, as you said, where we always push through, that's not making the stress go away. It's just actually building it up. But when we look at things like meditation, relaxation exercises, also finding exercise that you really like, those are things that are in your control and that are things that make your experience with stress better.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that, isn't it? It's taking the time for yourself to look after yourself. I think there is a lot in this that I hope anybody listening kind of really actively listens to the fact that you have to recognize something for yourself. Of course, you are somebody that's providing support through your coaching. So once you realize you have this stress in yourself and you want to outreach to somebody, but I think there's a point, that first step, let's say, of self-recognition of this is not okay. How I'm feeling is not normal and it's not okay. I shouldn't feel this anxiety. And if it is your job, for example, so let's look at that, in a circumstance where it's a job, you're completely right. There are things you can do about it. Yes, let's say the biggest and most final step would be actually leaving and exiting that job. However, that's not always an option for people because of finances, circumstances, whatever it may be. So there's so many things that kind of I can give a personal kind of relation to that, where I've been in a job many years ago and I was much younger, and I think my experience has been that I have gotten stronger through being in similar situations over time, and also age brings you experience, brings you confidence, has brought me confidence. I can only speak on my own experience, but I used to have a boss many moons ago that didn't respect me or anybody else that was in the team, our time. So I remember being in an office up till 9 p.m. at night, being asked to start to run through a range because that suited her. There was never any, team, have you got a private life? Have you waited all day? And like you said, if there's a deadline, we were told that range review would be at, say, for example, 3 or 4. You're building yourself up for that time. This person then ignores that and carries on, and maybe it's 3 or 4 hours later, then you're expected to be on your A game at this ridiculous time at night to, perform and tell everything and being like, really kind of pinpointed, but you must know this and you must know that. And you're like, I've been in the office for 12 hours, give me a break, And my reason for giving this kind of example over people in certain positions and how they can have that effect on you, and this is my own experience, I wasn't strong enough at the time to even say, do you know what, I've got to go home, I've got an appointment, I've got something that I need to do, because I guess I was young, I felt intimidated, I wanted to prove myself. And like you said, my only answer at that time was yes. Yes, I'll do it. Yes. I didn't think, do you know what? Actually, this is not a good time. I'm not on my A game. I'm not going to be able to perform. Can we now move it till tomorrow? But it was just a yes. And I remember that being one of the most stressful times in my career, so much so that I used to hate going to work, ride all the way home, and then I couldn't sleep at night because I was worried about the next day, and I'd overthink what I could have done better, what I should have done that day. And it was this revolving circle. So I'm just highlighting this because anybody listening, I want to bring through kind of a real example of where I can totally relate. Thank God I broke the cycle, because I realized it was something I wasn't willing to do. No job was worth that level of stress, but it took me a long time. And it took me to a point where, I had to really look at myself and think, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? So yeah, those triggers that you talk about, whether it's firsthand or something, like you say, things that are going on in the world politically, and it just kind of triggers something in you, makes you feel a certain way. Those are, huge things. And it's finding this coping mechanism that you talk about as well. So one is the recognition within yourself that I'm not okay with this anymore. And then it's, what do I do about it? And how do I do it?
Yeah, exactly.
So you speak on, and I've looked at your socials, which I'll mention at the end and make sure people can direct themselves to your socials. You speak on many things that a lot of people can do, such as breathing exercises, coaching with yourself, nutrition, all of these things that definitely help when you're feeling incredibly stressed. So what is it about certain lifestyle shifts that can definitely support how a person is feeling when they are feeling incredibly stressed?
Yeah. Changing your habits around, like in your day, has a massive influence on how you're feeling. Like if you start your day feeling really rushed and like not having enough time already, then it's almost like your day is not gonna become any better. So what I really recommend is first of all, really plan your time. I think very few of us, we have like massive to-do lists and everything, but they're not actually helping us plan our time. Mostly we overestimate what we can do in a day. And then at the end of the day, we feel like, oh my God, I haven't got anything done. But it's mostly not true, because we have gotten so much done, but it doesn't feel like it because we just overestimate what we can do. And so looking at that, like time management is definitely a factor, but also, as I mentioned, a morning routine. So like taking a couple of moments of stillness in the morning can make, a really big impact, because you're starting the day like calm for yourself, and you're not already rushing into somebody else's like environment or your work environment, which obviously we know like it can be a lot, like having colleagues jumping at you, asking you a million questions. But if you have that calmness, that inner calmness of yourself in the morning, that can already really help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely key. It's something that since I've been working for myself, I've definitely gotten much better at, is putting together an agenda, a realistic agenda. That's the thing as well.
Yeah.
Because I think as much as we work on it ourselves, we are our own worst critic. I know I am. I'll always could have, should have done that.
Yeah.
But I'm getting better, and it's something that I'll probably have to work on until whenever I can retire. I can retire. However, everybody has tools, and I'd love to know what tool you use. I simply use my Google calendar, and I section out my day, and I do it so much so it's probably a bit OCD, but I make sure I have my lunch break. I don't just put it in, I have it.
Yeah. That's so good.
And it's so important. And we'll get onto that a little bit from like a nutritional point of view as well. So I do it this way. I use Google Calendar, as I say, and I'll do it from when I wake up until I start my day. at work. So it's purely for work.
Yeah.
And I'll do it where I'm even, okay, I need a 15-minute break, because I think this is the thing. Now we're working remotely. You're used to at work, you'd be just as productive. However, you go to the kitchen, you'd meet a colleague, you'd have a chat for 5 minutes.
Exactly.
And those things you don't do at home. You just quickly get your coffee, you quickly back again. You're like,
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to anyone. I haven't had any fresh air. So creating those habits and then making them habitual on a frequent basis is so important. So I'll even put in there, the reason for saying that is I'll even put in, take my dog for a walk. And I'd be like, take him outside. It's good for, he needs to go.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. That's my kind of tranquil place, is being outside in the fresh air. And I'll do it that way. And if something needs to shift till tomorrow, do it. So many people have their own way of kind of setting out their agenda for the day and setting their purpose. That's mine. I know I follow a lot of like female entrepreneurs, including yourself, and I know some people even put like their to-do list and share it every day on their socials. And sometimes that's even really, really inspiring of, oh yeah, see how that person does it. Oh, and actually their day, you can see they've put in their personal things as well, like take the time, go for a coffee, meet a friend, and you're like, that's what it's all about. So kind of giving a little bit more to that, what you've just said. So the things I find inspiring, the things that I do. What does a day look like to you? How do you set out your day and how do you approach it?
Yeah, I love that you use a calendar, because that's what I really recommend, instead of using a to-do list, because when you put the things in your calendar, you actually have that realistic view of what you can get done. And the other things you can then plan for tomorrow, or maybe they're not even important, but you feel like they're just piling up on your to-do list and they feel important, but maybe they're actually not. So yeah, I love that. I personally use Structured app. Is similar to a calendar, and you also just really put the things in that day, but it shows kind of like a timeline. So the time is running basically, and you can see how much time you have left for each task. And yeah, I really love that. It's similar to a calendar, but yeah, it's just a different way of looking at it. And taking those and like planning in those breaks and this personal time is really crucial, not only for entrepreneurs, but also for people in corporate jobs. Like sometimes we would just work until like 7, 8, you will know this, right? That we would just completely forget about everything else, but we then expect to that show up magically to like a meditation or to exercise, but it's never going to happen that we're sitting there at the end of the day and magically find ourselves in like a meditation because we have so much time left at the end of the day. That's just not going to happen, because we are busy and there's no way to like, how do you say, like negate that. That's just what it is, and it's not going to change, but you can change, as you said, like put in regular breaks and put in like habits that really serve you, like eating in quiet, for example. That's also then where nutrition maybe comes into play. Like when you're eating in quiet or like a calm position, your digestion will work better, because stress suppresses our digestion, and that's when also then digestive issues can come up. And I think probably everyone knows that digestive issues don't necessarily make you feel good, but they can also make you feel stressed. Like if you constantly deal with them, like that's not a great day. That's not a great way to spend your day. And also maybe now that I talk about the gut or digestion, our gut actually produces a large amount of serotonin, so our happy hormone, which is so crucial when we think about mental health, because if our gut doesn't function properly, it will not produce serotonin and other hormones properly. And then we will obviously feel worse. Yeah. And there were many studies who also link depression to gut issues. And if you improve your gut, you can also improve like mental health symptoms.
That's really interesting, and actually makes a lot of sense when you talk about on it the way you do. And it's it's that approach, isn't it? It's not one and then deal to the other. It's a balance of the two. You know, you don't just deal with your stress and then your diet's going to get better, or deal with your diet and stress is. It's a balance of the two, and understanding how to treat both parts of how you're feeling with equal amounts of respect, I would say. You know, you've got to respect your mind and your body. And I think that's really important. I like the way you actually say, you know, take the time to eat peacefully. I think, again, I have been in so many situations, and thank God I don't do it anymore. But I remember the desperation of not being able to take a lunch break, sitting at your desk and eating like out of, you know, what you've brought in for the day, and then maybe not being able to finish it because you're not enjoying it. So you know, you're not eating a proper lunch. I remember all those things, and I've been in the environment where I've seen other people do it as well. And I like the way, you know, we should make these things almost a ritual. And an example I probably could kind of bring to the table is things like in the morning. Maybe you'll tell me if this is good nutrition or not. Cannot start my day without a coffee. It's it's my go-to. I have to have a coffee. And I have to have that coffee by myself in the living room. Like that is my thing. No TV, no phone. It's just sit there. Like it might only be like less than 5 minutes, but it's that is like my 5 minutes.
I love
because otherwise it's like there's just things that happen. So at least if I get that one coffee that I'm like, and I treat it with respect because it's how I start my day. So at least then hopefully everything else will flow. But that is kind of my thing. And I really, the coffee is precious to me in every sense, for its caffeine and for the taste, for the enjoyment that I have around it. But what does nutrition, is there any kind of specific ways that, you know, maybe can we break a cycle? Is there something we should look at, not only from like what you said, how the gut produces serotonin, having that alone time and respecting the fact that you know, you maybe have made a meal and you now want to, you know, with the same love and attention that you've had preparing it, eat it in the same way instead of, you know, quick, I've prepared it, but now I need to, you know, quickly eat it. Tell us a little bit more about that whole journey of recognizing and how we can kind of change things if that's what people that are listening want to do.
So I think for our gut health, like a variety of fruits and vegetables, like generally plants, is really crucial. So there was a study that showed that 30 plants a week actually are the sweet spot to giving a variety to your gut microbiome. And at first that sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, it's actually not that many. Like, for example, I always have like porridge in the morning. And so then we already have oats, which is one plant. Then maybe you go pumpkin seeds, and maybe then you'll have 3 types of berries. Then you're already at 5. And then if you add chia seeds, let's say, or hemp seeds, then you're already at 7 plants. So it's actually not that many.
Yeah, when you look at it like that, because I was on my hands, I was like, okay.
Exactly.
That's doable. That is just absolutely a really nice breakfast that is doable.
Exactly. And what I always tell my clients is that if sometimes you just have a lazy evening, you know, but if you can look at your plate and then just be, how can I add one more plant to this plate? And maybe if you have bread with, let's say, eggs and avocado, add a side of just bell peppers or like a cucumber. So then you just have one more plant and you make your plate more diverse. So it's a really easy way of managing it, because I know that not everyone has the time. That's also why I don't give meal plans or that many recipes, because I'm not sticking to that. I think it's so much easier when you just have like a guide on how to balance a plate. And maybe I can share that, because I think that's a very easy way of looking at it. It's just choosing one like slow carbohydrate, which is like can be potatoes or sweet potatoes, whole grains, all of these things, and then choose one type of fat, like the source of healthy fat. This can be avocado, olive oil, all of those things. And then the third one, and actually most important one I want to say, is protein. So just choose one protein that you add, and then those three are really the key things to like a balanced plate. If you want to go, so like protein, any protein of choice can obviously be plant protein like chickpeas, kidney beans, but also obviously eggs, meat if you do eat meat or fish. And those three things are actually the key things to have like also a blood sugar stabilizing meal. I think probably everyone heard of like the glucose goddess by now, and how she talks about how important like a balanced blood sugar is. And I think it's a bit of a hype. I think it's a bit overhyped in my opinion. But still there's some truth to it. Like if you have a balanced meal and a balanced meal of all these three components, you're actually already good to go, and you have a stable blood sugar. And a stable blood sugar really just means that you don't have this like huge energy crash because you've eaten a massive amount of sugar, because carbohydrates then lead to producing insulin. And if we get rid of, or if the insulin decreases, then that's when the energy crash happens. That's already very, very deep into into
I find
nutrition.
that fascinating, though. This is actually really relevant. I recently had a close family member that wasn't feeling too good and went to the doctors and got told that they are on the borders of diabetes. It runs in the family. And exactly what you said is kind of like in my mind, ping, ping, ping.
Yeah.
And they're now, in the morning, wait till a certain time. So it's almost like this fasting approach, because they were told that, like you were saying, the glucose and the insulin was peaking too high, and then there was this low. So changing, this is maybe an example that is a little bit more extreme, but somebody that was told, if you don't sort out your diet now, this is where you're headed, which is actually quite serious, because if you do head down that route, it can be, every choice that you make with regards to food has a very clear and direct result. So changing the diet up was literally within weeks had changed, the statistics, changed body type, changed like their approach to everything. And they were like, oh my God, I feel so much better, feel better physically. But energy wise, there was a shift in energy, like you say, not this kind of spike. So that is really interesting. And I think, one question I would like to ask on that, because I often is, there's times, obviously, I'll try and eat as healthy as possible. But we're all human. There's a time where you like just have that craving of like, I don't know, whatever it is for somebody. Mine are like Maltesers and Twixes. Those are like things. I'm like, just need a bag of Maltesers. What is there, sometimes when you're going down, let's say you kind of, okay, I feel like I need to have a bit of a health kick. I'm going to do it for X amount of time. Of course, you have the longevity, but there's where you might like really kind of put a fork in the ground and say, right, I'm going to be really good. I'm really like kind of strict to myself. But if you have those cravings, is there maybe an alternative healthy craving that will give you that just that comfort that you need? What's your advice on that? Because often it does two things for me. I either enjoy, like, for example, a bag of Maltesers, and I'll be like, okay, well, that's just like a nice little sweetener. I feel better. It kind of satisfies the mind more than anything. But then there's another time, depending on how my stress levels are, that I might just go off the bandwagon, and I'm like, right, well, I had Maltesers last night, so I'm going to start the day with this bad habit. And that's kind of how I go. So what's your advice on that?
Yeah, I think like forbidding yourself too much is just gonna result in more cravings. Like that craving is likely not gonna go away, but if you just incorporate it into a healthy diet, it's perfectly fine. Like I have a piece of dark, like 70% chocolate every night because I just really love it and it really satisfies my craving. But when, for example, after lunch, sometimes I have like rice cakes with banana and peanut butter. that really satisfies my cravings, and like sprinkle some chia seeds on top, and then I already have like a bit of protein, a bit of carbs, and some fiber actually from the chia seeds. Fiber, I forgot to mention, but it's really, really crucial also for stabilizing blood sugar. And fiber can be found in all plants, really. And yeah, so that satisfies my cravings. But if you just look at, maybe I want to say nature's sweets, it's like dates, bananas, fruit, all of that can just be a really nice, yeah, just a really nice alternative maybe to, yeah, whatever you're craving, whether that's crisps or
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
all of these things.
I think it's being like you say, not denying yourself, and it's
Yeah.
about that realistic, you know, those temptations, and also just sometimes, you know, it's you're out and about, and I think actually in Germany it's much better.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have the Portuguese people coming after me now. So I live in Porto. Kathrin, you're in
Oh God.
Germany,
Yeah.
and
Pastel de nata.
yeah, it's just
Oh God.
there's so much. I think there's my opinion, and yeah, this I have to state this. My opinion is in Germany there was so much more, especially around the Berlin area, much more highlight around kind of healthier foods. There was a lot more options, in my opinion. And it kind of made you more aware. Also, you pick up like hints and tips. You're like, oh, I could do that at home. I could do that. Whereas anybody maybe from Porto or Portugal that is listening and you know of more places, let me know. But I feel like there's not as much of that. So my point for bringing that up is it is then easier to buy the branded things that I've just like mentioned, you know, because it's, oh, I need it. Oh, there's not like such a thing. I'll just go and grab that. So yeah, I think, but like you say, don't, you know, rule it out. It's not a bad thing necessarily. It's, you have to allow yourself to have these and satisfy your cravings. It's just knowing how to balance it, I guess, and
absolutely.
offset one to the other.
Totally. And also, like, I find that once I start, or like a couple of years ago, now it's become just a normal like part of my diet. But looking at how many things actually contain additional sugar and kind of like reducing those really gives yourself actually different taste buds. It makes you more sensitive to sugar. So like as soon as you reduce that, you find things that you previously maybe really enjoyed, they are a lot sweeter now. And so eventually I don't crave them anymore. Like I don't crave crisps or things like that, or like milk chocolate, because I just prefer the taste now of like dark chocolate. So if you're looking to like change a couple, just like a really small thing, just look at where sugar is added, and then just change to some reduced sugar alternatives. I think that can already make a big change.
Absolutely. And then kind of coming back a step or two with this relationship between stress and nutrition. Stress, I think, is a little bit like what we kind of captured at the start, which was, you know, you feel it coming and it kind of, you know, it's growing at some point. And this is where stress, anxiety, burnout kind of creeps in. But along that ride, it's not just like that. It's like stress. Okay, I've had a really bad week. I'll try and manage it over the weekend. Oh, it's coming back. And it's kind of this like almost graph of how it works. And a little bit like diet, like you said, when you have, you know, certain foods, it happens in the same way. So in saying that, if you have somebody that, you know, has come to you for coaching and they're incredibly stressed out, and you also, they reveal that, you know, my diet is, as a result of that, I'm looking for kind of the quick fix of what sugar or something may give to me. What would be your advice kind of to start? What would be a good starting point for anybody that's, you know, listening to this, recognizing a couple of things that we've spoken about, and it's like, okay, well, how do I break those habits and where do I start? Because sometimes it can feel overwhelming if you don't know a lot about nutrition. You know, your cupboards don't help you. When you go into the store, it's overwhelming. So what are those, what's like a good, maybe even talk us through like a day of what a good breakfast? I know you mentioned porridge, but what is a good breakfast and a lunch and a dinner? What could that look like?
For breakfast, I always really recommend focusing on protein. So for my porridge, I always add protein powder. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea, but then really focus on the protein first. And like I always say that like center your plate around the protein, because protein really keeps you full. Our bodies need it for everything. Like every cell every cell in our body needs protein to like build muscle, like all of those things, all of those like building processes, I want to say. And then, so yeah, that can be one type, but it can also be like a nice whole grain bread with 2 eggs and avocado. Then you really cover all of those 3 things. I think it's a popular breakfast for a good reason. It can also be like a bowl with something like cheese, where you then, or like yogurt, I would rather say. So like Greek yogurt with some fruits and maybe some oats to top it off with, or chia seeds. So like then you have the Greek yogurt or any type of yogurt you like as the center and as the biggest component. And then the fruits, which are then like the carbs, and also chia seeds, which are then like the fiber, they just come on top. And chia seeds, for example, all of the seeds and nuts, they contain really healthy fats, like unsaturated fats. So those could be like 3 types of breakfast that, yeah, I always recommend, and that are generally really simple also to prep, like especially the yogurt and porridge. I mostly, like most days of the week, I prep myself overnight oats, so that I just really have to grab them out of the fridge in like 2 seconds in the morning. And it just makes life a whole lot easier. I know that a lot of people like prep maybe on Sunday and prep for 5 days. I can't do that, so I always just do it in the evening. Like after we had dinner or something, I just go to like the kitchen and just prep that. And I find that makes it really easy to then, the first decision of the day, the first nutrition that you're putting into your body of the day, already know that it's going to be healthy. And for lunch, I'd say always when you focus on these 3 things. So for lunch, that can be like whole grain rice or whole grain pasta. So also like, I think pasta is like not the devil, I want to say. I think, many people think they have to deny all of the pastas, the rices, and the breads in the world, but it's actually not necessary at all. So if you have some whole grain pasta, maybe with like a side or like a sauce of, let's say, tuna, and tuna tomato sauce and some veggies, that's something that I really like. But you can also swap the tuna for anything like tofu or shrimps or any of those things. And plant-based, then you would have some maybe chickpeas on the side. So like making a bowl out of those 3 components can be just a really easy way to throw everything together and also prep it. And I recommend that for lunch, you don't have like the biggest portion of grains, whole grains or carbs, because that's, as we mentioned, like spikes your blood sugar, which I want to really emphasize. It's not a bad thing at all. It's the most natural reaction of our body. But if we just look at energy levels and energy crashes, it's nice to like look at it and not have the biggest portion of carbs. And for dinner, I'm really not like strict at all, really. If you always look at the 3 components, in danger of repeating myself. But
I think if you kind of follow that as a rule of thumb, and it's easier than you think. I think with a lot of nutrition, I personally, it sometimes feels overwhelming and feels like, oh, no, I wouldn't know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to put that together. But actually, it's, like you say, protein, carbohydrate, and your vegetables, which is kind of how you normally would approach a meal. Sweet potato, nice piece of chicken if you are if you're not a vegetarian, and then a couple of different types of vegetables. So I think having somebody explain it to you, that how you can do it, and like for example the breakfast, this is something that is key for me, because like I said, I am the type of person that if I create one bad habit of the day, I'm done.
Right.
Until the next day. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, well, I've had that now, so I just may as well. So starting the day right is everything. You know, after the coffee on my own, then having like what you said, porridge is a go-to for me. Greek yogurt with fruit is a go-to as well. So those are really good tips. So I think I'll definitely take them away and make sure, you know, I implement it more and more. But it's what I want to say and what I want to point out is the fact that it's not as difficult as I think people think.
Make it. Yeah. Like all of social media sometimes suggests we have to start with a green smoothie and like a celery juice and whatever, but it's not actually necessary. Like if you just have a balanced meal, it's totally fine.
Yeah, and I think that's it.
Yeah.
It's the fact that, you know, we don't have to change our world. It's adapting to little things, and it's having those hints and tips that help us along the way, definitely.
And I also just want to say, you mentioned earlier, like feeling like you're falling off the bandwagon. I think putting ourselves on a bandwagon is like the first halt, I want to say, because we don't have to be on whatever bandwagon we choose to be. Like any time of the day, and that's all also like you mentioned, like the once I start a bad habit, like everything else falls apart as well. Like we can change our day at any time of the day. If it's not to have this all or nothing like experience or like default mode. I know that's the reason for a lot of people, but I always say, like, if you haven't gotten that super nutritious meal in the morning or in for lunchtime, you can still make a healthy choice in the evening. It's absolutely fine. Like, and if you have this all or nothing mentality, then yeah, I recommend just changing up one small thing and looking where you can just make one small change of that day to break up this all or nothing mentality.
That's exactly it, because I know I am that person. I really am. So yeah, not letting it get to the extremity of, oh well, you know, I've started that way, might as well keep going.
Keep going.
Why do I have that? Yeah, and it is like you say, well, okay, let me make more of a conscious choice then. If I haven't done it in the morning, I can do it in the evening. Like it's not, I don't have to draw a line in the sand that I'm just gonna have you know, this bad day. And I guess that's you know, that's a really really important point as well, because you know, you approach that with food and or mental state. You know, I've had a bad morning, I'm gonna have a bad day.
Exactly.
You know, and you kind of write it off that that's the way your day is going to go, but it doesn't have to. And I think that's a really super important thing that you've said, you know, that, you know, write it off. Oh, that was a bit shit, you know, but it's done now.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it doesn't have to mean that that's going to be the rhetoric for the rest of the day. Absolutely not. You know, you can turn it around, and that's the thing. Again, it's you can turn it around, as in, you know, you're in control of your mind and your body. Yes, we need support. Yes, we need tools. But ultimately, unless it's the person themselves that makes that first step, you know, to, you know, for example, coming to you for coaching or listening to this podcast and taking it on board, whatever that may be, I think, it definitely has to start within yourself.
And we are so much, I speak to so many people who say that they don't feel in control over their day and over everything that's happening to them. But if we look at the 3 layers that I mentioned earlier, there's so many things we can't control. I always then, in such a conversation, try and focus with people on the things they can control and really like list them out, you know, like look at what can I control? I can control my time. Even, of course, if I have a child, I cannot control all of my time. She is going to consume, like your daughter or your son is going to consume a lot of time. But I recently worked with a mom who also has, who's a nurse, so really stressful job and overall stressful environment. And she realized that she doesn't have to be the perfect mom, the perfect nurse, the perfect wife all the time. It's okay to leave the dishes for a day and take, you know, and take yourself, take 5 minutes for yourself out of this day. And I heard Tony Robbins. He's a really famous life coach, and he said once that if you don't have 10 minutes for yourself, you don't have a life.
It's
And
true. It's
really
true. You
stuck with
can't
me.
do that. Yeah. And it's not, now I've kind of heard this a lot. It's not finding the time, it's making
Making
the
the
time.
time. Yes, absolutely.
And it's true, you can, if you really try, of course you
Mhm.
can. And it's so important.
Yeah.
It's just looking at, like you say, oh, it's going to take me 10 to 15 minutes to do all them dishes.
Mm.
Would it be more beneficial just for me to sit down and take those 10 to 15 minutes and I'll get to that tomorrow? Because
100%.
the world is not going to end because there's a few dishes in the
Exactly.
sink, you know.
Yes.
And that's just sometimes how you have to cut yourself some slack
Yeah.
and give that time to yourself.
And also like household, those things are like infinite tasks. Like my a coach that I work with, she said that those are boomerang tasks. Like they just never end. They always, like the wash, the laundry is always going to pile up. It's not going to end. So it's fine if you let it sit there for like a day or two, because it's never going to end. But if you always feel the need to like have everything finished, I want to say, or have everything done, it doesn't actually benefit you, because it's gonna pile up again. And so just letting that be for like a day or two can make a big difference.
so true. And things that we can all relate to, they're just things that we all have to face,
Yeah,
laundry, dishes, these
exactly.
small
Yes.
things that are, dishes for one, it's a daily task. But
Mhm.
yeah, if you can try and ignore it,
Yeah.
and it is incredible. Something some people might be like, oh, really? But for some people, that causes a huge amount of anxiety. And,
Absolutely. Yes.
having that mess in the house might be like, I can't, this is just not, I can't
Yeah.
do this. This is
Can't
too
switch
much.
off.
But maybe try it. Challenge
Exactly.
yourself to be like, you know what? It's at the end of the night, I've got them dishes to do, but I'm going to just leave them.
It's fine.
And when I get to the breakfast and I'm doing the breakfast dishes, I'll do those couple as well. Like, and
Yeah.
that, you saved your evening
Yeah.
10 minutes, but those 10 minutes are precious to some people, to
Totally.
all of us actually, but
Yeah.
more than others, so I think I really like that as a boomerang task. I know there that I need to do, but I'm leaving them
Yeah.
till
Yeah.
later, or maybe magically my husband might do.
Yes.
Let's see.
Also, yes,
Probably
absolutely. Yeah.
not.
We don't have to do everything on our
Yeah.
own. There's also one of those stress-producing thoughts. I have to do everything on my own. Like nobody can help me, but in so many situations, people can help and people are willing to help. Like who doesn't like to help? Everybody likes to help. So I always think that if we deny help, we're robbing someone of like a happy feeling, because everyone gets a happy feeling that everybody is just happy to help. And so I find it really nice to think of it like that.
I like that actually. That is really, really sound advice, because yeah, it is lovely to be able to help somebody, especially when you care about them and you want to be able to relieve them of time or stress or pressure,
Yeah.
whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And it is unbelievable though how many people don't want or don't know how to ask for help.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
could be a very small task, anything. Help me chop the vegetables.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to be there at this time, but I need to have this other task, like bring the child. Can somebody help me with X, Y, or Z? And those small things are both welcoming, like you say, from both the person that's being helped and the person that's helping, because you're only going to help somebody because you want to.
Exactly.
But having the confidence, I would say, to ask for help is a lot. And I think, that kind of comes back full circle to what both of us do for a living.
Yeah.
We're here as people that, want to help others as coaches, and to mentor people and try and support them in whatever way possible. So I think once you ask for help, how little that is, whether it's a small task or something greater, I think it's the first step to knowing what you want.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's
Absolutely.
like on that good path.
Yeah. And I think we always hear that asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. And I think for many people that doesn't resonate, because it's just this like very radical opposite thought, but maybe looking at it from a perspective of, I have an opportunity to make someone else happy because they're helping me. Maybe that resonates with more people than just being like, it's a strength, but people may be like, but how is that a strength? I still see it as a weakness, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No,
Yes,
completely. It is how you look at anything.
yeah.
It's subjective, it's objective, it's all of those words
Yeah.
that, you can look at
Perspective.
things. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So with regards to stress that we've spoken about today, you may look at people around you and think, oh, how did they cope with that? They make everything look so easy. That's them.
Yeah.
All different.
Yeah.
Who knows how they feel when they go home and close the door at night when you're not seeing it.
We don't see
And
the
also,
BTS. Yeah.
there's this kind of saying nowadays is stay in your own lane. I actually really like it because
Yeah.
you should really just really look after yourself and concentrate on you, because once you start letting too many external thoughts coming in, which is one of the three things that you said before, yes, we can't avoid them, and I don't think it's a good idea to completely avoid them. We have to have a certain amount of awareness, but know when to control that, because the more we keep comparing and looking at others, it is nothing but going to have a certain effect, which is more often than not negative, because we're comparing what they're doing better than us.
Exactly.
So it's that control mechanism of
Yeah.
trying to eliminate that as much as possible. Like I say, it's not possible to ignore it. We wouldn't be living if we had tunnel vision.
Yeah.
However, taking it to extremes where we then, like you were saying, we have those thoughts where I'm not doing enough, I'm not as good as them, I'm not this, and that amounts to stress, this comparison in life. So yeah, I think that is a really important thing, and it goes right back to the very first thing that you mentioned, which I think sometimes when you going through this conversation right now, and even through life, something that happened at point A doesn't make sense. You have to get right to Z before that makes sense again.
Yes.
And it's now I know. Now I know how this really
totally
affects and means certain things. So yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to dig a little bit deeper to like find your triggers and like what makes you feel stressed, and like really look at those thoughts, because we rarely have like moments in the day where we really take time to reflect and pause and look at what's happening in my brain and what's happening with my thoughts, what are the triggers that make me feel stressed. But I recommend observing yourself in those stressful situations and trying zooming out and then look at the situation and be like, does this really matter, or do I make this like much more of a bigger thing than it needs to be? So for me, like the saying, is it going to matter in 5 days or 5 years, doesn't always help, but sometimes it can on like a short-term perspective. And I mean, looking at the things, if they matter, really can help. Like when for example, I post something on Instagram, obviously I look at it from like, what are people gonna think, but also like person X, Y, and Z, they have posted like 100 posts on Instagram, so they're always so much more ahead of me. But this, like, coming back to the comparison, the more ahead of me is just robbing you of your own joy and doesn't take into consideration your own abilities and your own timeline. That person maybe had other resources that you don't necessarily have. Maybe they had more time that you don't necessarily have. We only look at those, like, we can only look at those outside things because that's what we see on like social media, for example. Also, I think sometimes when we look at pictures of friends, we only see like pictures of holidays, and we think like how they are constantly on holiday.
I often think that.
But I talked to a friend like a couple of years back, and I asked her this, like, how are you always on holiday? And she's like, I'm not. I just keep posting my pictures of holidays throughout the year. And I was like, oh my God.
That's how you do it.
Yes.
And this is it. But we have our own we draw our own conclusions as well. You know, it's the reality versus Insta thing, isn't it? And it's social media, and you know, all these things are so related. You know, work, personal life, stress, nutrition, everything that we can talk about comes back full circle. And one thing that you just mentioned then that kind of again made me jump right to the start of our conversation was you know, for example, you mentioned one person, maybe they can post 100 posts a day. Slight exaggeration from what you said, but anyway, we'll go with that. You posted 5. Go back to your agenda for the day, and what was your purpose that you had for you and that you felt good when you put that agenda together.
Yes.
And I think just keep, like you say, keep reflecting on what you had said, because you know what you had set out with your intention, knowing what your capability is. And when you let in too much noise, that's when you start comparing these two things, but your agenda's over here and you've achieved this, so keep coming back to this.
Exactly.
And I think that's the thing. When we look outside, it's like, oh, and this that we've spent so much time trying to perfect, the agenda is somewhat feels insignificant, but I think we need to, like you say, zoom out and zoom in to what you intended to do. And I think we need that reflection on a daily basis, just to be like, yeah, I did do what I set out to do. Or if I didn't achieve 1 or 2 tasks, I can move them. If they're still relevant, I can move them tomorrow. I'll get to it. And you know, comparing yourself to other people, it's going to happen. That's for sure. We all do it. But
absolutely,
trying to bring yourself back and just be happy with what you have and where you are. But yeah, we could talk on this all day, because
I know
every single situation, you know, is completely relevant. And as I think now, I'm going to have lunch shortly. I'm like, oh, now I'm going to think about it a little bit differently. What will I have? And then I'll go into my afternoon, and I know I've got to edit this very video, and I'm not good at editing. So it's going to stress me out. But how am I going to control that stress? So everything that we spoke about is going to hit me hard in the face in like 15 minutes, you know, all those things. But I've learned a lot from what you've just said, and knowing the tools to approach certain things. Like, actually, it's Friday afternoon. Do I really need to edit it? I can probably leave till Monday where I'm fresher, and I'll, you know. So there's those sort of, I think those are the conversations that we need to keep having with ourselves. And tell me this. So for those listening, Kathrin and I know each other from our Zalando days. So I used to, and we worked together. What got you into this shift? Because I often talk with a lot of other people, and people approach me about career change as well. And this is a big career change. You and I obviously knew each other from the fashion industry. We worked for a big e-commerce platform. So, what at what point and why did you move into this world that you're in right now?
I think that I really loved my job. Like, absolutely, I loved doing what I did, but I also put myself under a lot of stress because I really wanted to progress. I really wanted to perform well, be promoted, all of those things that you naturally want to do when you're at the start of your career. And I didn't realize how much stress I was putting myself under. Of course, I was working long days, but I was like, oh, well, that's normal if you want to progress, you know. But then over the course of like a couple of years, or like I think 4 years into the job, roughly, 3 years, I started to develop like really weird symptoms with my shoulder, which eventually developed into a frozen shoulder, which I then had to get surgery for a year later. And that definitely made me realize, well, wait, something's not right here. The doctors were telling me this is just something that 60-year-old women have. We don't know why you have that. And I was like, well, thanks. That doesn't help. And just one of those like 3 or 4 doctors that I went to mentioned it like really briefly. Oh, this could also be stress, you know. And then just I had to go again. I had to leave the appointment again. But I was left with this thought of like, this could be stress. And I think that was one of the things that really led me onto the path to wanting to know more about stress, about nutrition. I always had a really natural interest for nutrition for like many years, but the stress thing was definitely new. And I eventually also got career coaching. So that then eventually really led me onto this path, because we were analyzing where my strengths are, where my hobbies are, also what I've always been interested in. And then we came into all of those things, and then eventually came to the conclusion, oh, I would probably actually be good in working for myself, but I also really enjoy health topics. Like I really enjoy mental health and nutrition topics. So why not try it? Like that's really how we left the coaching, how we ended it, with this conclusion. And I was not going into that. I was not going into the coaching with that intention at all of like pursuing a different career path. I was just like, I want to improve the situation. And the outcome was very different, but now I'm really happy with the outcome. So I think career coaching, like for me, it definitely absolutely shaped my career and really shaped my path. And I think there's, for many career changes, there comes this turning point, and obviously this really, like the whole surgery thing was definitely a turning point for me, and then led me onto this path where I am today. And I think it's always good to come from a place of like empathy and knowing what a person went through, because when somebody's sitting opposite of me in like a coaching call, then I know how they feel. I went through it for many years, and it's not something that I read in books or something. I know what they're going through. And physical symptoms are very common, like mostly one of the last signs of stress, but people experience them as the first signs, because that's the ones that we notice. And but then that's already actually very late in the stress management like the timeline, if you will. But when you experience these like really weird, like unexplainable symptoms, really look at your stress levels. I think every doctor always tells you this, like, oh, try and reduce your stress. And we push it away as it's like, oh, everyone says that, but it's true. Yeah. And for me also today, when I'm under stress, which I still am, everyone is a human being, and I am too, even as a stress coach, I still notice the stress in my arms first. So that's still something that is there. And and I later found out that in psychosomatics, I think that's what you call it, right? Like the symptoms that connect between your brain and your body, that the shoulder and the arms, they stand for like strength and pushing through, and articulation and like hard work. So it only made sense that that was
really interesting. Yeah, that your body that reacted, and basically your body was telling you it's not okay. And it's like what we said, it's that pushing things down. And eventually, if your head won't tell you, your body will literally be like, no, you're done, you need to stop. And this is how I'm stopping you in your tracks, to give you this kind of warning almost of take care of yourself. And I'm glad that you did, and you chose the path that you weren't expecting, but as you spoke through, what it is you love, what you're passionate about, you found where you are today, which is brilliant, because it's so nice to do something that you're completely passionate about. And you've mentioned, yes, you were and probably still are passionate about the fashion industry.
Yes, absolutely.
As am I. And I spoke to somebody the other day, actually, she's a psychologist, and she was saying, we often, when we meet people for the first time, it's, oh, what do you do? And I actually don't like that question. I think people try and make up their mind that they know you because of what you do.
Yes.
And we're so much more than just one job. We're so much more than what we do or what we get paid for. It's, you may enjoy that. It may be that you have been in the industry. I can say I have, and I loved it. However, I'm on a different path now, and I do something different. It doesn't mean that this is completely new for me. It was always something that I've been interested in, and I've just leveled it up, you know. So yeah, her analogy was, you know, we are like onions. There's so many different layers to us. We're not
Yes.
just a job. We're not just
Yes.
one side. And you know, it's like what we've done today. I knew you on a different level. I worked with you directly in the past. We knew each other for a certain amount of time. However, sitting today, I've known so much more about you in a different way, because we spoke on different topics that, you know, we didn't make the time to speak on before.
Yes.
Well, we didn't have the time, we didn't make the time, and that's the difference, you know. So yeah, guilty of that, but it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I've loved it. It sparked loads of thoughts in my mind, and I
I
think
love that.
so many people can relate to this, whether it's stress or nutrition or both. And I think both will definitely be what people can relate to in this podcast today. And hopefully there's lots of takeaways, which I can definitely say I'm going to do as well. And I think the finishing note would be definitely for anybody listening is look after yourself and make sure you make the time for yourself, listen to your body and reflect on where you are. You know, if you're starting to feel stressed, just think, okay, why am I feeling this way? What is it that is making me feel a certain way? And you'll know when you really, really take the time to understand why you're feeling a certain way, make that change. So that's definitely, you know, something that's a huge takeaway for me.
Yeah.
You know, and for anybody listening today, we'd love your feedback. Kathrin, I will.
That was a great summary, by the way.
Good.
A perfect summary, I think.
I will link all of your socials so that if anybody is, you know, enlightened, inspired by this call today, Kathrin is a coach in the nutrition world and also stress management. So I will redirect you to her. And thank you once again for joining me on your birthday. I wish you the best birthday evening and celebrate in whichever way you have planned. And yeah, thank you for sharing it with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking to you. And
me too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. We'll speak soon. Thank you, Kathrin.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.